Pretty much everything you think about intuition is wrong. Stay tuned. I'm going to unpack intuition. This is Damon Cart from NLP Gem. The truth about intuition is that it's counterintuitive. If you haven't already, please click subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can get these videos on a regular basis. The video I'm about to show you was taken from the practitioner training, and we got a little off track. We veered off the main topic and started talking about intuition and what it really is. Have a look. When people talk about intuition, I think we should really unpack that, because what is really intuition? It's not some magical thing that happens. Intuition just means that you've arrived at some sort of conclusion or evaluation. The means in which you've done it is unconscious. So you don't know how you've gotten there, but you've arrived at some evaluation. There's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell called Tipping Point, and he talks about that, where if you've studied something long enough, you've practiced something long enough, you can just make a split-second judgment, and that yes, that usually is the correct one. It's because, and it's not because there's anything magical about intuition, it's just that you've trained your senses to catch something. It's when we step back a lot of times and overthink it and question it and evaluate it too much that we can talk ourselves out of that gut feeling. But that gut feeling is based on solid sensory information.
That's certainly
100%.
Sensory information.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, where else would the information come from? It's not like something
okay,
divine.
Sensory, the five senses are things you can measure.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a sixth sense?
Not that we know of. I mean, not that we can.
Because we can't measure it.
Yeah, so
the limits of our knowledge are limited by our instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So often when you talk about intuition, it's the sixth sense.
See, I don't buy that.
Okay.
I think
is it more a extreme fine-tunement of acuity?
Oh no, I think it goes back to what I was saying about you take in information from your five senses, and sometimes those auditory, kinesthetic, visuals can be happening inside of you. It's not information you're actually taking out from externally, and then you suddenly arrive at some sort of decision, evaluation, judgment. The first part was unconscious. Suddenly the evaluation becomes conscious, and you go, oh, there's that thing. Because the other part was unconscious, we tend to think of this as being like something magical, something extrasensory, because the first part of that process was unconscious. We're not aware of the images we saw in our mind, or the tactile or proprioceptive feelings we had, or the voices we heard in our head. But all that came together, and you'll learn more of this when you learn strategies, how we go about doing things. And so like I did a demonstration with a guy who recently bought a car, and so we broke this whole thing down. You know, we started from when he bought the car and we walked it backwards. What did he see, hear, and feel every step of the way before he finally made that decision? This is the car that I want. Now, I don't know about you, I've had that where I walked into a lot and I looked around, I drove a few cars, and then I just know this is the car that I want. Now, there was a whole process to that. There was a whole process to what I saw, what I heard, what I felt, but there was a moment, and all that was pretty much unconscious, and there was a moment that I suddenly go, I just know this is the car that I want. And in that sense, that could be like an intuition. But there was a definite process to it. And a lot of that's unconscious. Because it's unconscious, it gives us a sense that it's like otherworldly or extrasensory. When it's not, it's really just a combination of all that information came together, and you finally made a decision, and when you did, that became conscious. As with most things that we can't explain, we like to give it some sort of magic quality or extra meaning. And in this case, we like to think of ourselves as having a sixth sense or some psychic ability. There's nothing else. I mean, if there is such a thing as a sixth sense, I'm not saying that, well, let me back up. I'm not saying there's not. I'm just saying we haven't coded it. And what we call intuition, it's like I was saying yesterday about my cousin, who he's completely apolitical in the sense that he doesn't watch politics, he doesn't do anything with politics, and he just said, I just know I hate Hillary Clinton. I said, how do you know that? And he thought about it. He goes, intuition. Like, no, there is a way that certain information came into you and you weren't aware of it. He's hearing whatever news is on or whatever, and then suddenly he just arrives at a decision. I don't like this woman. Is that psychic or is that extrasensory? No, the information just kept piling up until he heard enough negative stuff about her that finally his conscious says, I don't like her.
Product of the environment.
Yeah, he could not explain why. He had no good reason. He couldn't say, well, because she did this and this. He didn't know anything.
Subconscious.
Yeah, so there's nothing intuitive about that. It's just the media shaped his perception.
So is intuition nothing more than highly attuned sensory acuity at a conscious and unconscious level?
It doesn't even have to be highly attuned. Intuition is wrong a lot. It's in this exercise, you're more likely to be right to trust your intuition, and because like Dan knew he knew that something was different, but he didn't trust that. But he knew it, and in sensory perception, he caught something, but he didn't trust that.
How do we work with that? Because the same thing happened to me. I knew something was different. It was just a tiny, subtle.
Doing this exercise,
And I knew it was, but I said the same.
you keep bringing your awareness to this. You keep bringing your awareness to these subtle details, and you will start to pick them up more. And a lot of times when I get an intuition now, I know that there was a whole process that preceded that intuition in sensory experience. Now that doesn't mean it came from out here. It might have come from inside me. So then I want to walk it back and say, okay, well, how did I come to that intuition? And that's what I was saying yesterday. We have the sense that our intuition must be right, and that's not true. And in a situation like this, it's much easier to trust it because it's happening right in front of you. But when we make intuitions it's always good to listen to your intuition. I'm not saying don't listen to it, but it doesn't mean it's always correct. I've had intuitions and I was completely wrong. I had an intuition that when my wife told me she was pregnant that I was going to have a boy. I was wrong. But if you think about it, there was no sensory-based information for me to base that intuition on. It was just, I felt like I would have a boy for my first kid.
You have a 50% chance of being right.
Exactly. And a lot of times...
That's not intuition.
Well, I could call it that because I just had that feeling. There was no reason for that feeling, but of course there was. There was a lot of unconscious stuff that was packed into that, and then suddenly I just had this feeling that I was going to have a boy. Now, if it had come true, then I would say, I had this intuition I was going to have a boy, and I had a boy. My intuition was right. And then it kind of confirms this idea of an intuition. That's why I'm saying in a practice like this, in an exercise like this, you could say, yes, it's better to trust your intuition, but I don't like calling it intuition because intuition implies a lot of times, and maybe not by the truest definition of the word, but it kind of implies like it's something got piped in from some divine something or whatever, and suddenly I have this knowledge that is sort of psychic. No, it's not. The information came from somewhere, and I might not be conscious of where it came from. That's why it seems magical when I have an intuition.
So, compare these two things. I trust my intuition, I trust my senses, which feels better for you?
I would say I trust my senses, but it's not just about trusting your senses. If I see something, I saw it. The evaluation or interpretation I make of that might be right or it might be wrong. When you say consciousness is that thing that's often going to make a decision about something and have a selective seeing about it or an evaluation about it, which does limit the other information. It sort of filters out that other information. When you make a decision about something, you are going with certain parts of that information and filtering out others.
So NLP gives you more options give you looser filters.
More versatility, more flexibility, more ability to pull in more information as needed, bringing your awareness to whatever it is that creates this feeling of intuition. So I suddenly come to this decision or this evaluation, and I say, okay, this seems right, but let me backtrack on that and see how I came about this. And sometimes there are biases that we have, and that's a good way of bringing your consciousness to biases, so that your intuition is based on what you're actually taking in, the real information, not in what you want necessarily.
It makes me wonder if there's some connection between that and disassociation. Because when you disassociate, you can see more.
An evaluation is a disassociation. So when you make a decision or you make an evaluation of something, you are stepping back out of the situation. You're saying this or that, or you know. So yeah, in a way, it is a disassociation. Check out my website, nlp-gym.com, and if you like this video, please click like right down below. Also, leave me a comment or ask me a question. I'd be happy to get back to you. Remember, subscribe to this channel so you can get these videos on a regular basis. Take care.